boys, nothing on God's earth must stop the U.S. mail.
That's right.
That's right. That was a statement made by John Butterfield to his Overland Mail Company drivers. John Orrin Butterfield founded the Butterfield Overland Express, and that ran from 1858 to 1861. It operated a stage route running from St. Louis to San Francisco, and it established an important connection between the new state of California and the government and economy of the contiguous eastern states. And the Butterfield Overland Mail Trail route is actually being considered as a possible National Historic Trail, which means the National Park Service gets on board. It's really an important thing. I know out here in Tucson where we are, we have a lot of sites. Tucson was integral, so is Yuma, Arizona. A lot of our National Park Service sites, Fort Bowie, Chiricahua was all part of that. It goes all the way up to a lot of communities we've been covering over the years. And so if they did that, it would really help protect a lot of the stage stops that are just kind of, falling away.
Yeah.
And we're losing them. So I hope that happens. But today we have Glynn Burrows, who's a family history expert and owner of Norfolk Tours in England, joining us here on Big Blend Radio Champagne Sunday Show to talk about John Butterfield's historic family ties back to England. And apparently, because I said, hey, Glynn, I know you want us, as we travel the country on our Love Your Parks tour, I know you want us to go and find all these English connections, which is pretty easy. One of the things, I was like, the Butterfield, stage company, Butterfield sounds British to me. I looked it up online, and in Wikipedia it said John Butterfield's family came from, England. And so I'm like, Glynn, you got to do this one. And apparently it isn't all what it's cracked up to be on the Internet. So he's going to tell us about that and how to get around those loopholes. His article is featured in the January-March issue of Parks and Travel magazine, and you can see it right now on nationalparktraveling.com. Just type in Butterfield, you'll find it. You can also read Glynn's articles, other articles on there, and also on blendradioandtv.com. But importantly, go to his website, norfolk-tours.co.uk. Okay, I can have a sip of tea now. Glynn, welcome. How are you?
Hi, I'm good, thanks. That was a long introduction. That one was.
I know. I thought so, but I want people to understand this trail is so significant to the history of this country.
Something that really is important about these trails is that if they can be kept up and can be used today, that's a fantastic boost to tourism. Because if you're following these trails that often go through places that don't get many visitors, it's a great opportunity for local businesses to actually encourage people to stop and have a look at these stop and off posts or staging posts or whatever you call them. It's a fantastic thing.
It's true. Absolutely. People follow these trails like the Santa Fe Trail. There's the Overland Trail. So there's two trails connected with Butterfield. And we actually have a series of books. This artist lady, she painted, every stop of what happened and documented the history through her artwork. And it's really fascinating to see it and read the entries from the different, riders going across. And even John Butterfield, what's interesting is he created a stagecoach. He created all kinds, and one was called the Celerity because it was able to go faster than the other ones.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's a cool dude.
This is what happens, in England. Obviously, we've got routes and trails and footpaths and cycleways, but, we're lucky we've got, like, Roman roads and things that people can walk along. But we've also got quite a few more modern roads and footpaths and long-distance paths that have been created from old railway lines and things like that, because obviously in the 50s and 60s we lost a lot of railway lines, but they were in a lot of cases they were just left to sort of deteriorate. But in a way that was fantastic because the nature that these railway lines have left to build up are fantastic, because a lot of them have been left alone since 1960, and you can imagine the sort of wildlife that is created by an area being completely left alone for 50, 60 years, So it's really good. All these trails are fantastic.
Out here there's an organization called Rails to Trails, Jim Ossick, you've been on a radio show with him.
I have, yeah.
He's, avid hiker, walker, cyclist.
Yeah.
And I started getting into this organization because of what his posts. And what they do is the old railway lines, they go in and create hiking trails and clean it up and make it that, hikers going through can, have nice facilities like gazebos, Glynn.
Yeah, I know.
I know. You gave me a lesson on gazebos this morning. Oh, man. But now the Butterfields, when, I came up to it, was like, hey, John Butterfield's family came from here, from England, and I thought he was actually going to be coming from, like, kind of close to where you are in Norfolk. And then you start getting into, so Benjamin Butterfield is like, he's a descendant of Benjamin Butterfield. And I do want to say John Butterfield's son was also a huge part of the overland mail route in Butterfield. He was really a big part of mapping it. But Benjamin Butterfield, you go into his death and recording this, and then you start talking about what was going on with the calendar and the changes in the calendar. And now I know why I've been confused in the past on other things I've been doing.
Yes.
Explain the calendar.
Yeah, well, in 1752, they decided that as we hadn't been sort of following the year as we should have been probably, they decided that they would lose, I think it was 13 days, and bring the calendar in line with the season, and also start the year on the 1st of January. Because up until then, the year started on the 25th of March, which was Lady Day. So that's when New Year's Day was. So up until 1752, the year, New Year's Day, was the 25th of March. So if you were born in February 1752, you were born at the end of the year, before 1752.
Wow. This is so interesting. And Lady Day.
Lady Day is the 25th of March. Lady Day was the 25th of March, and that was New Year's Day. So if you were born in February before 1752, you were born at the end of the year. You weren't born at the beginning of the year, because the year began in the end of March. So this also explains why in England our tax year starts on the 6th of April, which sounds rather silly. But if you add 13 days from the 25th of March, you end up with the end of the 6th of April. So that's why the tax year begins on the 6th of April, which is a really stupid date to begin. But actually that was the first day of the year if you moved 13 days previous. I know it sounds complicated, but it is quite right. So when you have a look at the death of Benjamin Butterfield, everybody on the internet says that he was either 87 or 88, but he actually wasn't, because all his death says, or his burial says, that he was buried, or he died on March the 2nd, 87-8. So in 1687, March the 2nd was at the end of the year. But if you were writing it in the new calendar, it was actually 1688. Because even though the year didn't actually change until 1752, it was common practice for people to use anything from the 1st of January to the 24th of March and write the 2 years. It sounds complicated, but it's quite simple, really.
So this is why we call you Glynn.
No, so if we went back to the first calendar, we would all be a year younger.
This is called time travel, Nancy.
No, not really. I was born on the 21st of February, right? So if I was born on the 21st of February in 1600, it would have been the 21st of February, 1600/1. Because if I was talking about the old calendar, I would have been in 1600. If I was talking about the new calendar, I would have been in 1601. Because the year had started in January. If you understand, do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I understand. I just think it's really funny if we had to do something like that today, the whole world would be screaming on Twitter.
I know.
There'd be an uproar. There were, actually in 1752, there was an uproar that people complained that they had 13 days stolen from their lives. Because I think it was in September 1752, I can't remember the date, but, say for instance, September the 1st was going to be followed by September the 14th. So all the people in England, I know there was a load of people who complained that 13 days had been stolen because the first followed by the 14th, or whichever date it was.
Wow. And 13 is an interesting number, too. And then you add in leap year, and that messes people up, too. Sometimes there's a 27, sometimes there's a 28.
There was a guy, and I think there was a guy in England recently who tried to change his birth date. You said if you could change your name, why can't you make yourself 20 years younger? Maybe he's the first calendar guy. Madman.
No,
total mad. But anyway, so getting back to the internet, what a lot of people on the internet have said is that when Benjamin died, he was either 87 or 88, but he wasn't. It doesn't say anywhere in his burial note in the register itself. It just says that he died on March the 2nd, 87, 8. So that's what it is. So we still don't know how old he was. So
okay, but but you can work off of his burial dates, right? I mean, or in his will.
Well, you can. He also left a will. So his will tells us that he had adult children, and one of his children had got married in 1747, I think it was. Let me just have a look at my note because I can't remember all these dates. One of his children who had died, he had actually been married. He was married in 1667, and he died in 1673. So this is one of Benjamin's sons. So if you look at his son, and his son's name was Jonathan. So if you say that in 1667, when he died, he'd been getting me confused now. He died in 1673, but he was married in 1667. So if when he married he was, say, 25, which is roughly going to be about right, he would have been born around about 1640. So if his father was about 30 when he was born, Benjamin should have been born around about 1610, 1612, something like that. But obviously these are estimates. But at least it gives you an idea that when he died, he was quite likely to be in his 70s, which was quite a good age.
Yeah.
But he weren't 87, because it doesn't say that anywhere. This is what I'm saying about just taking notice of what other people put. That someone reads something wrong in the first place, and then that's just carried on forever.
That's why, duplicate content on the internet is a danger, and that's why Google cracks down on people stealing everybody's information or copying the same articles, because it's the truth. I mean, number one, if someone's written something, everyone makes mistakes. I do.
Yes.
I'm good at them.
So do I.
And and so when it gets copied around, now you're spreading something that's wrong. And this is someone's family history. You want it to be as accurate as possible, but isn't this also part of the reason that when even this conversation we're having about how the calendar changed and these kinds of things, it shows that the Butterfield stage route, I got into it because of the historic sites I've physically been to and I've lived on the trail, and I want to know about this route. I mean, it was one of the first big road trips. Ladd and Lewis and Clark. I mean, this is one heck of a road trip. So that's my thing in life. And to me, at the end of the day, you get most of the information that's accurate by going to these historic sites themselves. Why I want this to be a national trail is that when the Park Service gets involved, they weed out all the stuff that's wrong and put up what's accurate now. It doesn't mean that somewhere down the road a new finding will happen and things have to change. But you're going to have the most current, accurate, historic fact up there, and you're going to see things. You're going to see journal entries, the actual journals, and the dates will be right versus just taking for granted what you may find on the internet. So to me, this is where route travel comes in.
Well, exactly, because no disrespect to anybody who's done any research about anything on the internet, But unless you're looking at the original documents, you're just taking hearsay. And, I mean, I've seen some of the websites about the Butterfield family say that Benjamin was the son of Thomas and Hazel. Some of them say that he was the son of Thomas and Isabel. And both of these ladies, before they were married, were Murgatroyd. That was their surname. Some sites say that he was born in Halifax, but there's no record of him being born in Halifax or in any of the other villages and towns around that area. The problem is just this constant quoting of somebody else's website or somebody else's book that they've written isn't actually any good. You've actually got to go back and see where it's written in the first place. Mm-hmm. And, I mean, for instance, they say that he married his wife in Hitchin in Hertfordshire in 1632, and then someone else says he married her in 1629. But both of those years, both of those dates, there is no marriage in Hitchin. So nobody's actually obviously gone back and checked it, unless there's another church in Hitchin that the registers aren't online. So, but this is why you need to go to Hitchin. You need to go to Hitchin to see what there is there available. And this is why it's really important.
Yeah, we were taught in journalism school that unless you could verify something 3 times by 3 different reliable, trusted sources, you couldn't print it. Of course, it seems like things have changed today.
Very much so.
Yeah,
I mean,
people.
I was looking at one of my ancestors, and I did a search on a very well-known website, and somebody had posted a page all about him, and I looked into it, and they had him marrying a man in, I think, about 1770. I know that's legal today, but it wasn't legal in 1770. No way would he have married a man. And that's just silly. It's just somebody hasn't thought when they put stuff on the website. But I could quite easily, if I was that sort of person, I could just put it down and say, he was obviously gay and he married this man. He didn't. It's just a load of squit, as we say in Northern.
Yeah, that's funny.
Wow,
That's
wow,
funny.
how interesting. And going back to Butterfield was, I went and thought of Paul Butterfield from the Butterfield Blues Band. It's one of my favorite bands, and he's one of the best harp players out as far as I'm concerned. So then I started going, okay, where is he born? Because what happens if, these are all related Butterfields, right? And so I started doing research, and so he was born in Chicago, which makes sense with his harp playing. And then I researched that his family is Irish. So there we go. I'm like, okay, now what happens if the Butterfields... this is interesting because you even said that where Benjamin Butterfield comes from isn't necessarily the same place that everybody's writing about either. Is that
no.
See? He could be Irish.
I personally, looking at everything that I've looked at about Benjamin Butterfield, I personally think that he was probably from Essex, which is only 2 counties away from Norfolk as well, funnily enough. It's in East Anglia. Because Benjamin Butterfield was actually one of the founders of a town in America called Chelmsford. Now, there is a big town in Essex called Chelmsford. Now, there was also a farm in Chelmsford in America called Billerica. Mm-hmm. And there's a town in Essex called Billericay. Now, near to where Chelmsford is in America, which is where Benjamin settled, there is a place called East Haddam. But in Essex, there are 3 places called Haddam. There's Little Haddam, Great Haddam, and Much Haddam. So it seems very likely that Benjamin actually came from Essex, and when he settled and founded Chelmsford in America, it was because Chelmsford is probably the area he came from. But the only way to really sort this out would be to find somebody in England who came from the Butterfields in Essex and find someone in America who was directly related to Benjamin and have a DNA test and see if they share ancestry. And that's where it gets
So is this what
really
it's going to look like on our tour now, Glynn? We're going to go ask people to do, I'm going to walk around with a swab and open your mouth to people as we go. We're going to go around asking. I can see this tour being really interesting because I know we're going to go off and do the English connection and find all these connections, but now we need to step it up to DNA testing.
But it just shows you why our historic sites, our parks, and our museums are so critically important to our history, because this is where you're going to find the truth.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And also, I mean, say for instance, Benjamin, when he was living in whatever area, I mean, I don't know whether in Chelmsford in America there is a museum dedicated to the family because he was a founder, but there could well be artifacts, there could be writings in Chelmsford in America that would tie this together. But again, you need to go to the places and ask the right people and go to the right places, because I would think that there would be something in Chelmsford in America that would help to tie back to why it was called Chelmsford in the first place. Because you don't call a place a name without a reason. That's the reason that Hingham in Massachusetts is called Hingham, because Abraham Lincoln's ancestors and everybody else who settled in Hingham in America came from Hingham in Norfolk. So that's why it's called Hingham. So it's common sense that someone who comes from Chelmsford in England, if they were going to found a town or a city, they would call it after home, wouldn't they? It just makes common sense. So it'd be really interesting if somebody in Chelmsford in America was listening and they could tell me where Chelmsford got its name from. Who thought about it? Was it Benjamin?
We're going to have to go there. We're going to go there then. It's on the list.
When we lived in Kenya and when we went to South Africa, we found the same thing. Any place where the British had settled, they named it the same as where they came from.
Margate,
in England.
Yes.
East London.
Yeah, that's right.
Mm-hmm.
That's why there's so many places. There's so many places called London. There's a lot of places in America called Norwich. There's even places in America called Norfolk, because people who came from this area, when they go there, they're going to call it after home to make them feel a bit like home. It's common sense, isn't it?
So when you were, and I know you've talked about this before, but I want to touch on this for folks doing their family history, because it is like this is an investigation. You even make that note in there, and I'm like, this is like solving this mystery. And now now I have to do the Butterfield Trail. Now because I got geeked out on it big time as soon as I started getting into it, and we're going to have to do it, and we'll have to go to Chelmsford now and do it. But you were talking about the will seems to be one of the most important pieces of family history is a will.
It can be. I mean, some wills are totally useless. They just say, I leave everything to my wife, and they don't even name their wife, so that's totally useless. But others are really good. I mean, his will is really good. He died in 1688, as we know. He'd made his will in 1677, so he'd made it 10 years before he died. He mentions his sons, Nathaniel, Samuel, and Joseph. And that's interesting in itself, because there are names there, Nathaniel, Samuel, and Joseph. They could well be family names, so that helps. He mentions his grandchildren, who are called Jonathan and Mary, and they were the children of his deceased son, Jonathan, who I talked about earlier. And he also mentions his son Nathaniel's wife, Deborah. So that gives a little bit of a family tree already. That gives him, his children, and a couple of his grandchildren. So, that is a really little potted history of him. Very often wills will mention as well places where people came from. In England, very often you'll find somebody will leave some money to a village church, or they'll leave money to the poor of a certain village. So that then points to that village having a really big importance in their family history. So, one of my distant ancestors in, I think it was 1754. Yes, it was. She was a lady who never got married, and she had lived to be, in at least in her 50s and 60s. So she was, relatively old for the time of the year, the time of day, And she not only did she mention her sister and her brother-in-laws and their children, but she was mentioning all these different members of the family. So she actually gave me like a 3-generation family tree, because as she had never married, she left her property to her nieces and nephews. And she explained in the will how they were her nieces and nephews. They were the children of her sister, So that really helps. And then another will I've seen, which is really fantastic. It was of a lady who must have been in her 90s, and she mentions her great-grandchildren. Well, that's totally amazing. You've got a 4 or 5 generation. Because if some of these ladies who are married then mention their brother, so you've then got their maiden name as well, haven't you? Because her brother is obviously the same name as she was before she got married. So a will can be really fantastic. And some of them are just, you find a will and you're just jumping up and down, because they've got so much information.
It's really fascinating to me too, because we're looking at, you're going in the 1670s, and here the Butterfield stage route, here it is in the 1860s. So this 200-year basic, tree. And when you think about what these people did, this family, they come over to America, start anew. And, both John Butterfield and his son, John Butterfield Jr., what they created was amazing. And John Butterfield Sr. also was at the beginning of the Wells Fargo and all of those other stage companies. And then he turned and made this into a bigger thing. But when he really went to map it out and make this trail happen, he enlisted his son and this man called Kenyon, Marquis L. Kenyon, okay? And then all of a sudden, so there's this Mr. Kenyon. So then they have Kenyon and Kenyon, Kinyon in here, and then Kenyon. And so now this name always intrigues me, having lived in Kenya.
Yes.
And of course that's got British connections. In Joshua Tree National Park, so the Butterfield stage route kind of goes over that area. So more of the Anza-Borrego Desert side. However, so Anza-Borrego Desert kind of butts up against Joshua Tree National Park. It's where, goes from the Colorado Desert into the Mojave Desert style. And Kenyon Overlook is this incredible desert view where you really see where the two meet, and they call it Kenyon Overlook. And now I'm thinking, okay, this is going to be that Kenyon dude. And I've always wondered why they called it Kenyon, because it looks like parts of Kenya to me. So I'm going, they're naming it after Kenya. I don't know. It feels like this today. I'm like, okay. But then his name changes too. So this is this other part.
But that could be, don't forget, back then lots of people didn't learn to read or write. And they just verbally, someone would, especially with different accents, the name Kenyon and Kenyon could be exactly the same name. It's just how somebody said it. Because remember that not everybody was literate.
Yeah, they're doing it. M.L. Kenyon. It's through everything. Yeah. That's interesting.
It is fantastic. And also, what you've just said, why has Kenya got that name? Where did that come from?
Yeah. Now I'm going to have to start on that. Do you know?
The country?
Yeah.
No, I don't. I was just thinking.
Jomo Kenyatta was the president, but where did he get Kenyatta?
Because remember, before it was Kenya, it had a British name. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I can't remember the British name. What was Kenya before?
I don't know.
It was in Tanganyika.
I'm just thinking
it was just East Africa.
Yeah, they called it.
South Africa used to be Rhodesia, didn't it? Because it was named after Cecil Rhodes. I just wonder whether Kenya was named after anyone called Kenyon.
No, it was named after Jomo Kenyatta.
South Africa was Zimbabwe was Rhodesia.
Oh right, Zimbabwe. Right. Well, I knew it was
Zimbabwe,
somewhere down there.
Botswana was.
It's just like Ceylon and Sri Lanka.
It's like Uganda
Yes.
and Zaire and all those countries.
All those
had,
names. Tanzania and Tanganyika.
Right, they all had British names. Before they had British names, they had African names, and then they went back after the British were, moved out, I guess, or left.
Wow.
Then they went back to African names.
It's fascinating to think, did they get their name from somebody who came there and settled, or did the person get the name from the place? We see in England a lot of surnames are from places. And the same reason as you would call a town that you founded in America after your hometown, if in medieval times, if you left your village or your town and went somewhere else, your surname would be where you've just come from. Because there might be another John who's a blacksmith, for instance, so he would be called John Smith because he's a blacksmith. But if you've got a John who comes from Chelmsford, he'd be called John Chelmsford because that's where he come from, you know. So very often it's interesting to see which came first, the place name or the person's name, because it doesn't always follow that, you know, one way or the other.
Right.
It needs to be looked at. And the fact that, you know, you've got Benjamin Butterfield arriving there, and you've got John Butterfield being such a forward-thinking and a hard-working person who was founding all this trade route across America. If you think about it, his ancestor Benjamin was doing exactly the same thing, because he left England, went across to America, and founded Chelmsford in America.
Yeah.
You know, so I mean, he was a real outgoing, forward-thinking sort of a bloke. So, although it's 200 years apart, you've got such a lot in common with these two men, that they did the same thing. They really went out there and did something, which is quite amazing.
This is exciting. I'm excited about this because now it's like, you know, I'm addicted to the Juan Bautista de Anza National Historic Trail, of this story of, you know, 200 people walking up to San Francisco and then founding, you know, the Presidio, and I'm really fascinated by this because so many cultures are connected, so many people. And now I'm looking at, I have to go look up where Father Font comes from. I've got to go back in there now that I'm thinking of this. But Butterfield, I've always been fascinated, and it started with living in an area, Julian, you know, the mountains, that area was part of it, and this lady's paintings, you know, and so now I'm in it. So now we're going to have to go. This is going to be a big part of the tour, so we're going to have to keep this story going as we travel. But I do have a question for you, Glynn, on this, because, you know, talking about the researching part of it and doing the wills, and I know a lot of people come over to England with you to go and step in the footsteps of their ancestors. Do you help them kind of uncover as much as possible before they get there, or do you work with them together when they're there?
Well, basically, what I like to do is I get them to tell me what they already know, and then I like to surprise them when they get here. Because I don't want to tell them all the places we're going to go to. I mean, they obviously know roughly where they want to go, but I like to turn up at a place and say, you know, what do you reckon to this place? And they'll say, oh, this is lovely. And then I can say, well, this is where your great-great-great-great-great-grandparents were married in 1720 or whatever. And that is really quite amazing. And, you know, one of my favourite things is when my customers cry, because it really does give a connection. You know, it's a real emotional connection, and I like to surprise people by that. I mean, I had two ladies over from Canada, well, probably a couple of years ago now, and they contacted me and they said they had this particular ancestor, and I did some research, and I actually found that they were related to me. Now that's the first time it's happened.
Wow.
And I didn't tell them that. I didn't tell them anything about it. But when we went to a particular little village church, which is called Siderstone, just near Fakenham, we were sitting in the church, and I said, so this is where, I think their ancestor is called Sarah, and my ancestor is called Edmund, and that they were brother and sister. And I said, you know, Sarah was baptized here in, I think it was 1772 or something, I said, and in this church as well in 1773, there was a man called Edmund baptized here as well, her brother. And then I showed him a picture of my son. And I said, this young man's called Edmund as well. I said, and he's called Edmund because it's a family name. I said, and we're actually cousins. Well, these ladies just looked at me with their mouths open and gave me the biggest hugs going and were grinning from ear to ear. Because not only had I taken them to where their ancestors were born, but there was a blood relation standing beside them.
That's wild.
You know? And it is amazing. You know, it really is. You know, and that's what the fun is.
It just reminds us all that we are connected.
Absolutely.
We
so,
are.
You know, it really
these
does.
people didn't have a clue. They didn't have a clue that I was related to them, and neither did I until they sent me what they knew about their family history. You know,
and then they're
in
really excited
Canada.
when it brings out Diane's Cheese scones, and they're like, "Oh, good, direct family connection for scones. We like this."
Exactly. What it's
I
all
love
about.
that. Wow, what a cool story, Glynn. I mean, gosh, I mean, look at your story with your relatives in Canada, and I mean, this is just this is how far it can go, and we are all connected. And on that note, it is time for our Champagne Sundays toast because you know we got family tradition here.
You have indeed.
Yes. Champagne music. That's what I'm putting in my will. Feed them champagne and cake. Give them all that. Cool. So, Glynn, what are you toasting to today?
Well, as you've already sort of said, that you know you're getting fascinated with all this story, and I'm getting fascinated with this Benjamin Butterfield, because although we know so much about him when he got to America, we don't actually know very much about him before he got to America. And you know, he left England in probably the 1630s or 1640s. He was such a brave man, and he seems to have taken his wife with him, and possibly a couple of small children. And I just hats off to those people who went across from England to America in the 1630s. You know, it's bad enough going across the Atlantic today, but you know, in the 1630s. So I would like to toast Benjamin and his wife because they are what this is all about. You know, all of those people who went to America or Australia or New Zealand, Canada, wherever. You know, it's those sorts of people who make these fantastic connections that I love to dig up, and it's without them, it would be a sort of a boring world for me. I'd be sitting here on my own.
There you go.
I would like to definitely toast to Benjamin and his wife. I think his wife's name was Anne.
And they had no idea what they were going to end up doing.
Absolutely.
No.
You know, and you know, because it wasn't easy when they finally got here either.
No.
And we've just only scratched
my
the
hat's
surface.
off to them.
Yeah. I'm going to follow you up on that because my toast, and normally I go at the end here, but my toast goes with that. Mine goes into the National Trail System. These trails, whether it's a driving trail or walking trail, these trails, being able to connect the routes and follow the maps, to me, Route 66 is also on the docket now. I mean, people go vote. Next year we could have Route 66 designated as a National Historic Trail, and it's really true. We were talking about this on the show the other day. That means more funding can come in, and so many historic corridors and heritage areas are created through that, like what happened in Yuma, Arizona. So this is really exciting, and whatever we can all do, we need to do, and we're going to have to start really just now. This is going to be a new project, Nancy.
I know.
So I toast.
But, I mean, we're going to do the trails. And so I know there's going to have a list of names that keep popping up.
Glynn, you're going to be so busy. So at some point we'll call you from Chelmsford and say, Glynn.
I look forward to it.
I know, there it is. So I toast to the trails and everybody working towards doing the study, the surveying, and putting it out there. What are you toasting to, Nancy?
Something really silly.
Oh, good. We like that.
Because today, for some reason, I don't know why, it's considered National Chocolate Covered Anything Day.
So we can put chocolate on anything.
Yeah, you can just go. And so, I mean, I'll just leave that to people's imagination. Go cover something in chocolate.
You can cover a Mr. Whippy.
A Mr.
Yeah.
Whippy.
With
but
chocolate.
I mean, it's what a silly day. But it's close to the holiday season, and you get to eat more sugar than you should, and chocolate's good. And
yep, there you go. I like that. I'm into the
totally
chocolate
mad.
for sure. I know. Yeah, I know. It's all good. Glynn, happy Christmas to you and Diane and your family, and
Thank
Grandpa
you.
Glynn. That's what we're going to call you from now on, Grandpa Glynn.
Yeah, and call me what you like.
We'll keep it nice, So I know we'll be chatting with you in the new year. We've got lots to do now. We've got a whole new project. Everybody, keep up with Glynn. Again, go to norfolk-tours.co.uk. Again, norfolk-tours.co.uk. His article on this is up on nationalparktraveling.com. Just type in Butterfield or Glynn, and you'll see his expert page there, and also on blendradioandtv.com. And Glynn, as always, we like to play music for you. And because I know you like time travel and, that kind of thing, this is called Shapeshifter. It's one of my favorite songs by Wally Lauder here in Tucson, Arizona. I wanted to tie it back to here where we are because we're on the trail. And when you hear all these things are like, when was he really born? Where did he come from? And trying to figure it out. I just figured this is a good song. So here it is, Shapeshifter, everyone. And you can keep up with Wally at wallylauder.com. Thanks, Glynn.
Thanks a lot. Speak to you after the new year.
All right. Take care.
Go cover something in chocolate.
Yes. Bye.
I met a shapeshifter by canyon to shade. I only knew her for a day. Never learned her name, but I loved her just the same. She turned into a hawk and flew away. Holding on, letting go. What I think, what I know. Westbound train, across the endless plains, across the plains filled with buffalo. Went out to the coast, followed by a ghost, followed by the ghost of the life I'd known. Holding on, letting go. What I think, what I know. Out on the stars, they weren't so very far, they weren't so very far away. I took one to my heart, it wasn't very far, took it to my heart, gave it a name. Holding on, letting go. What I think, met a shapeshifter by canyon to shade. I only knew her for a day.